Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. Today we have a very exciting video. We're gonna rank every single book that I read this year. There's 40 of them, give or take, on this list. I love making tier ranking videos. I've only made one before, but I love watching them. So let's get into the tiers that are here. Can we tell I have been listening to a lot of Sabrina Carpenter? All of these tiers are lyrics in some way or another. So the first tier is I Know I've Been Known to Share. These are books that I will not shut up about. I will use any reason that I can to bring these books up. These are my top 10-star books of the year, favorite things I read. Our second tier is One of Me is Cute, but Two Though. These are for books that I really liked and that I would read more from these authors or more from these series. I thought they were really good. It's just not quite good enough to make it to like my top like 10-star reads of the year, but they were still really great. Next, we have Sounds Like Blah 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 Blah. These are fine books. They're kind of forgettable. I didn't have major issues with them and I didn't have a searing love for them either. They're just mid. Then we have Zero Bedchem. Do I even have to explain it? These are the books that me and this book just zero bedchem. We don't jive. I can see how it could have bedchem for you or for somebody else, but with me, none. And finally, we have Whatever Devil's Inside You, Don't Let Him Out Tonight. These are the books that were scary to me. Scary, bad. And I don't call a lot of books bad. I try and keep it chill, good vibes, but I think there's only one book that's going to go in this category. Okay, so let's get started. These are sorted in chronological order of how I read them throughout the year. So the very first book I read this year was We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. I really enjoyed this book. We're going to go One of Me is Cute, but Two Though, because I did end up reading more books by her later in the year. I loved this book. I read it in like a day. It was really engrossing. I loved our narrator, Mary Cat. She is so sick and twisted, but in such a fun way. She's really fun to follow around. I have this penguin orange edition of it. I would like to read you the first paragraph because I think Shirley Jackson just has some of the best openers. My name is Mary Catherine Blackwood. I am 18 years old and I live with my sister Constance. I have often thought that with any luck at all, I could have been born a werewolf because the two middle fingers on both my hands are the same length. But I have had to be content with what I had. I dislike washing myself and dogs and noise. I like my sister Constance and Richard Plantagenet and Amanita phalloides, the death cup mushroom. Everyone else in my family is dead. I remember reading that opening and just being like, what do you mean the rest of your family is dead? What do you mean you wanted to be a werewolf? Shirley Jackson just has like such a unique voice with all of her characters that I've read thus far that immediately gets your attention. I think this is the type of book that it's really beneficial to go into it blind, so I'm not going to tell you anything else, but if that opening sounded good to you, I would highly suggest picking this up. It's like really short, like 175 pages, and you do find out why the rest of her family is dead. Next up, we have Book Lovers by Emily Henry, Zero Bedchem. Me and this book didn't really jive. I did like the couple together on like a, I guess, logistical level. Like I saw that they were good together, but it was hard for me to connect to them. Even though they had personality traits that I relate to, they just didn't feel like real people to me, which is something I struggle with Emily Henry books. Like they always feel like they're almost realistic, but not quite. It just always falls flat. So didn't love that one. Then we have A Curious Beginning by Deanna Raybourn. This sounds like blah, 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 blah. It was okay. I really liked the characters in this, so I might possibly give this series another chance sometime in the future. I read it right after Book Lovers and I was kind of like falling into a slump because of Book Lovers, so I think I enjoyed this even less because I was like in that slumpy mood. So maybe in the future I'll try it again. I really disliked the mystery because this is like a mystery romance sort of book. I only picked this book up because Katie is Reading on YouTube is really into the Veronica Speedwell series. This is like an 8-book series, and she also says very openly that the mysteries are not like the reason that she reads it. It's for the romance, and the romance is really good. So I can see how the romance could sustain me for further books. I just haven't had the heart to try again because I was so disappointed with this one, but I didn't hate it or anything. I really liked the setting. I think it had a fun vibe. It's like in a Victorian kind of grungy era. Next we have Food Rules by Michael Pollan. I read this in my kind of like gym girly era, so sounds like blah 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 blah. It was educational, informational, very easy to read, super short. I like Michael Pollan as an author. He writes a lot of books about food, and psychedelics. So I'm interested to read more books by him, maybe like a full length work and not just something super short, because I think this was like 50 pages. It was really tiny. Now we have Brutes by Diz Tate. Oh, I loved this book. One of Me is cute, but two though. I will read anything that Diz Tate publishes next. I loved this book so much. This was about a group of really young teen girls, like 13, 14-ish. They live in Florida, and one of the girls in their town goes missing. And we're just following like the girls in their everyday life now that somebody they know has disappeared, and like what happened to her, what happened leading up to this, what happened after it, where is she? But it's really not a mystery. It's more of like a weird acid trip of a book. I love this book, not because of the plot, but because of how it's told. It really experimented with form in such an interesting way. It had a really weird collective narrative going on that I've only seen in one other book, Bunny by Mona Awad. So if you like Bunny and how weird and like trippy that book is, you'll love this. It's got some magical realism elements as well, and it really examines the maniacal obsession of teen girlhood. It also goes out of chronological order, so you're seeing like some of the perspectives of the girls during their childhood and then when they're adults, and how the events of their childhood impacted them all throughout their adult life. I do have one quote from this book. "We laughed and then we pretended to cry like girls who weren't like us because they were alone and we didn't love them." So yeah, that's like the creepy little vibe from that book. It was so good. I highly recommend this book. Then we have The Deal by L. Kennedy. This was a reread, so it's one of these. I know I've been known to share or One of Me is cute but two though. I think I'll say One of Me is cute but two though, because when I think of my like top god tier books of this year, I don't know if this necessarily hits the same, but we'll see. This might change. I love this book. I love the off-campus series. Previous to this year, I had only read The Deal, and then back in like February, I reread The Deal and then moved forward with the series, and I'll talk about my feelings about those books later, but the first book is my favorite. It is just so good. It's fake dating. It's got Garrett Graham, who's probably like one of my favorite book boyfriends I've ever read. He's fantastic. He's just amazing. That man can do no wrong. If you've never read the off-campus series, it's a hockey romance about four guys who live in a like off-campus house together, and each book is about one of the guys that lives in the house. So our first book is about Garrett Graham. He's the captain of the hockey team, and he meets Hannah Wells, who is like a really smart girl in his class, and she agrees to tutor him after some convincing, and the relationship follows from there. I love the emotional connection that these two have in this book, and the way that they care about each other and support each other is just, it's so sweet. I love this book. Okay, now The Anthropocene Reviewed by John Green. We've hit our first I Know I've Been Known to Share book. I love this book with my whole heart. This was so good. So I read a few John Green books when I was in middle school, like most people did. I read like The Fault in Our Stars, An Abundance of Catherine. I think I read Looking for Alaska, but I can't totally remember. So I enjoyed his fiction when I was a kid. I tried to reread The Fault in Our Stars as an adult, and I really didn't get into it much at all. So I don't know if I like his fiction anymore. I have to give it a better chance and like actually finish one of his books, but I know I love his nonfiction because this was phenomenal. It's a collection of essays about pretty mundane topics like Diet Dr. Pepper, academic decathlon, just random things that are a part of his life, and he just shares his thoughts on it and then gives it a star rating from 1 through 5. And this book made me cry several times. I listened to certain chapters over and over because they were so emotional for me and meaningful. I just feel like I got to know John Green in such a personal way, which is one of the things that I love about literature, because I don't know him. I probably will never meet him, but reading this book made me feel very seen and like I had a friend, and like I was learning about somebody and understanding them in such a raw and authentic way, and it was just really beautiful. I highly recommend this, even if you read just like a few of the essays in there. My favorite one was probably the two that I mentioned, Diet Dr. Pepper or Academic Decathlon. Maybe Diet Dr. Pepper is number one. If you're feeling like a little hopeless in life, or you need to be reminded about the beauty in the everyday things, then this book is just perfect. Next is How Much Land Does a Man Need by Leo Tolstoy. Sounds like blah 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 blah. I hardly remember reading this. It's a short story by Tolstoy. It's my first Tolstoy read. I was just trying this out because I had the like Penguin Little Black Classics collection. I had all of those, so I was just reading bits from that. There was two stories in here, the title story, and then there was a second one about like an angel that I wasn't super into, but the title story was pretty good. I liked his writing style, so I think I would probably enjoy a longer Tolstoy work once I get to that, but because it was so short, it's like 50 pages in that book, I hardly remember it. Next is another reread. I reread A Court of Thorns and Roses this year. This is One of Me is Cute But Two, though, because obviously I finished the series. I didn't read Silver Flames, but I'm open to it. I do really like Sarah J. Maas. Unpopular opinion, I think the first book is my favorite in the series, which is crazy because pretty much everybody's favorite is A Court of Mist and Fury, but I reread this book and had so much fun rereading it. And then I moved on to the second book and stopped like halfway through at the best part. I stopped at like that scene in the Court of Nightmares. I remember when I first read the series, it took me like 2 months to read the first book. And then I flew through the second one in like 5 days and then flew through the rest of the ones that I read. But I don't know, it's something about the Spring Court. I just love the vibes of the Spring Court. I like the other courts that we go to visit later in the books, but the Spring Court is just really, really pretty. I like the little mini adventures that we go on as we explore the fairy realm for the first time and just like getting to know all of the characters. So I really enjoyed this reread, and obviously the end is just super fun. Then we have Red Rising, 0 bedchem, 0, which is crazy because I am a massive Red Rising fan as a series. But the first book, I was confused. When I read the first book, I was just like, there's no way I'm reading the same book the rest of the internet is reading, because everybody that I had seen read Red Rising online loved it. I felt very mid about it. It just felt like a Hunger Games ripoff in space. So this is my least favorite book in the series, but since then, you'll see my rankings for the other ones I've read thus far, but I do love this series. It's just this first one was really weak to me. I didn't think this was a bad book. It's just I didn't think it was anything special when I read this, but I'm so happy that I continued with the series anyways and went on to book 2. Then we have The Mistake by Elle Kennedy. This is the second book in the Off-Campus series. This, I think sounds like blah 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 blah, maybe? Yeah, no, I think it's gotta go in One of Me is Cupid too, though. I do like The Deal better than The Mistake, but I like The Mistake better than all of the books I have in my blah 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 tier. It's gonna go up here. This was John Logan's book, and the main character's name was Grace. She was like an awkward, babbly sort of protagonist, and I did like that. I didn't find her annoying at all. This one I think might be the shortest in the series, so I do think that was something that I noticed. I kind of wanted a little bit more from this book, but I do remember I had a fun time with it. I really liked that John Logan's character came from like a not stellar background, because I love when a romance book does that, when it's not just like everybody's super rich and wealthy and powerful. He had like some problems at home that I thought were really interesting and handled pretty well. I did really like this book. Then we have Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. This was my first R.F. Kuang book. I think this would go and sounds like blah 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 blah. This was a good book though. I did enjoy this. I read it in a day. I listened to the audio because I was on my period and just like stuck in bed the entire day, and I listened to this. It was very fast paced. This is like a, I don't know, like a thriller kind of psychological thriller. It's about this girl who steals her best friend's manuscript after she dies, and her best friend is an Asian American author, and the girl who we are following is a white author, and she's kind of pretending to be Asian and taking credit for this story that is heavily based in Asian culture. It's got a lot of good commentary on the publishing world. Overall, I'd say this was really entertaining. It kept my attention the entire day, but it's not something I really ever think about. Now we have The Score, also by Elle Kennedy. This is the third book in the Off-Campus series. One of Me is Cupid too, though, of course. I think this is my second favorite. If I had to rank them, I'd say The Deal was number 1, and then The Score, and then The Mistake. But they're all going in this tier because obviously I keep reading the books and I do really like them all. That's why I'm continuing with the series. This was Dean's book, which I was anticipating from book 1. I think this was probably the funniest book in the series. I remember laughing out loud multiple times when I read this, and I think I read this like really, really fast. Then we have The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I Know I've Been Known to Share. I think I talk about this book in every single video. This was a reread. I read it for the first time last year, reread it in the summer this year, and just as good as the first time, if not better. I kind of did like a third reread low-key, like because Ryan read it for the first time this year. So after my reread, he started it like 2 months later, and I kind of was like reading along with him and looking at all the quotes that he was highlighting. I just love The Secret History. I've talked about it so much, but if you don't know, it's a dark academia story about these group of college students who kill one of their best friends. The prose is just gorgeous. I love the way that Donna Tartt explains things. I'm so excited to read more of her work. I think this year I might read The Little Friend, which I think is the next book that she published after The Secret History, because if you can believe it, that was her debut. I mean, I can kind of believe it because it took her like 10 years to write this book. She typically releases like once a decade. This is obvious 6-star, 10-star book. Love that. Then we have Adequate Yearly Progress. Sounds like blah 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 blah. I did actually really like this book though. I found this at a random secondhand bookstore and it reminded me a lot of the show Abbott Elementary. If you like that show and just seeing what it's like day to day being a teacher, then you'll probably really like this book. This isn't as funny as that because that show's a comedy. This is more of just like a literary fiction, but it's got a little bit of comedy in there, but I did really like it. It just follows different people who are employed by a public school. So like the superintendent, the principal, and then a bunch of teachers, and just shows their interconnected relationships, what they're going through at home, what they're going through at school, how the things at home manifest at school. And I thought it was a really interesting look at those lives, and I had a lot of fun reading it. So I would recommend this book. Like anything that's in this third tier, like sounds like blah 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 blah, like they are good books. I think the differentiating factor between this tier and the One of Me is Cute But Two Though tier is that for One of Me is Cute But Two Though, I can see myself rereading these books if I haven't already reread them, and I would read pretty much anything that this author writes, whereas for this third tier, I liked it a lot, but I wouldn't necessarily like read it again or read all of this author's backlist. So take that as you will. Then we have Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. I did a reread of the Harry Potter series this year. Well, I started it last year and I read the first 3 books and then I finished up the last 4 this year. I was hesitant to even include these in here because I love these so much. This is like my 3rd or 4th time rereading the series. So let's just handle all of them together. Should we handle them all together? Yeah, screw it. Why not? I'll just put them all in I Know I've Been Known to Share because this is such a comfort series. I love this series to death. I have a hard time picking between them and like ranking them because it really is like picking a favorite child. They're just equally loved in my eyes, and it was fantastic to reread the series as an adult. I think the last time I reread it, I was 16 years old. I just love books, man. I just love how with certain books you can read them over and over again and they just get better with age, like fine wine. That was this experience. I'm not really gonna talk about the plot because you probably already know. Yeah, doing that reread was definitely a highlight of the year. I had so much fun. If I had to say which one I had the most fun during, it's definitely Deathly Hallows. I had so much fun rereading Deathly Hallows. Like the end of that book, like the last 200 pages is just so epic, so good. And I think I did rewatch the movies. No, I didn't. I didn't rewatch them. So I should do that. I should rewatch the movies now that I've done my reread. Never Lie by Frida McFadden. Whatever devil's inside you, don't let him out tonight. How dare the internet lead me astray with this book. There is so much hype about Frida McFadden, and like I said earlier, I'm not much of a mystery or thriller girl. Like a lot of the times when I read these sort of books that are holding information back from you and then release it at the end, I'm really often disappointed. Like 9 times out of 10, there's the one, which is why I have these standards at all. It's not just me. God, this book was a train wreck. Our main character, she was super annoying from start to finish. A lot of the decisions that were made throughout the book were just distractingly stupid. I know main characters of like mystery novels often have to do stupid things because like that's the only way you can get the plot moving forward. But this book is about a doctor who disappears and leaves all these tapes behind that our main character discovers in her house. So we're following our main character as she's listening to the tapes one by one, uncovering new information about like what could have happened to this doctor, what happened, like did her boyfriend kill her, did this person kill her? We're trying to figure out what happened to the doctor the whole time we're listening to the tapes, and it's such an interesting concept. It had me on the edge of my seat, like I wanted to know. And then by the end of it, okay, I'm going to give a spoiler now, so if you don't want this book to be spoiled, you can skip to this timestamp in the video. But if you don't care, which I wouldn't recommend you read this book, so when we find out what happened to the doctor, it turns out our main character is the one who killed her. So my issue with this is that it's not even an unreliable narrator, it was just a lie, an authorial lie. How can our main character, who we're getting interiority based on, like I think we were in the first person, how is it that she's listening to these tapes trying to figure out what happened to the doctor when she knows she's the one who killed her? It was just really strange, and the voice that the character had throughout the entire book was this really like sweet, naive, trusting sort of person, and then by the end of it, when it is revealed that she was the person who killed the doctor, it becomes this like really creepy, sinister, like she's crazy sort of voice. But it's like when you're in first person, you can't just like give them a personality change at the very end of the book. Like there should be these like seeds. It was just so incongruous to what we had been told the whole time, and not in a like, ooh, shocking plot twist way. It was just in a kind of lazy, you didn't even try to tie these together sort of way. So it was just bad. Okay, next we have The Year of Less by Kate Flanders. Sounds like blah, 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 blah. This book was good. It was about minimalism. It's about Kate Flanders' year of doing a low buy, which is where you don't buy anything that's not a necessity for a year, which I'm interested in doing a low buy next year. I was interested in doing it this year, but I didn't really do it. I love books about minimalism, which is why I read this next one, Goodbye Things by Fumio Sasaki. Did I read these back to back? That doesn't sound right. I think I've got the order mixed up. Hold on. Oh, it's because I removed the Harry Potters, that's why. But Goodbye Things was similar, but Fumio Sasaki didn't do like a low buy year. He just is a minimalist. And this was about why he is a minimalist, what things mean to him. There's this really great quote by Josh something, who is one of the founders of the Minimalists podcast. And he says, love people, use things. And I try and think about that all the time when I like get overwhelmed with the stuff in my life and like feel the need to buy more things. Things are just things, and we're not supposed to love them. We're supposed to love each other. So this book really encapsulated that idea, and I really enjoyed my time listening to it. So we'll also put this in Sounds Like Blah, 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 because it's not something that I think I will reread. Maybe I would. This is the type of book that you could reread. The Kate Flanders book, I think I've gotten what I need from it, and it's fine. But Goodbye Things, I could see myself rereading parts of that book. Then we have Belladonna by Adeline Grace. I'm between Zero Bedchem and Sounds Like Blah, 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 Blah. We'll put it here, Sounds Like Blah, 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 because I did like it better than Zero Bedchem. I don't know. I think it's got to go in Zero Bedchem, because I had fun while reading this. This wasn't bad. I liked the vibes, but it was just so forgettable. I don't have really any interest in continuing the series, but it wasn't bad. Maybe it needs to go on up. I think it has to go up. Yeah. We'll leave it there. This was a YA romance about this girl, Signa, who has a strange relationship with death, who is personified like as a character in this book. And I did like the romance in here. The setting was fun. Mystery was, it was okay. It was better than all the other mysteries I've mentioned thus far. So I'll give it points for that. But it was just like an okay book. Then we have How the Garcia Girls Lost Their Accents by Julia Alvarez. Sounds like blah, 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 blah as well. I told you, a lot of these books are just going to end up in the middle because I don't have strong feelings about many of them. This was okay. I read this for a class. There were some chapters that I really liked because this is also kind of told in a way that like the chapters could be their own little short stories. Like they're not always super connected. I liked what this book was doing. It had really interesting themes about like the Latin American experience, but just readability wise, like if I didn't have to read this for school, I probably wouldn't have read it, and I probably would have like DNF'd it. And I wouldn't say it's something that I ever really think about, but it was interesting to discuss in an academic setting. The Idea of You by Robin Lee. I know I've been known to share. This is my favorite book of the year. I loved this book so much. I watched the movie The Idea of You with Anne Hathaway and Nicholas Galitzine in the summer with some of my friends, and I really enjoyed it. So then I went ahead and I read the book, and I loved the book even more. It was just fantastic. This was originally, the author says it was just inspired by Harry Styles, but it kind of reads like Harry Styles fan fiction, which let that sway you as to whether you would like this book or not. I grew up on Harry Styles fanfiction. I loved that as a teenager. The angst was really great in this. I loved the relationship. I think Robin Lee's way of writing, like dialogue and just scenes feels very realistic, even though it was an unrealistic situation, because being like Harry Styles fan fiction, this was about a woman in her 40s who starts dating the lead singer of a band that's kind of like One Direction inspired, and he's in his 20s. So if that age gap already is a turnoff, then you probably won't like this book. I don't really ever read age gap romances, but I was able to look past it for this. I think the movie's a good litmus test. If you watch the movie and enjoy it, then you'll love the book. But if you watch the movie and you're kind of like, oh, this is cheesy, the whole like dating somebody in a pop star band thing is like weird, then don't even try. But if you watch the movie and you find yourself wanting more, then I think you'll love it. I loved it so much. This book made me sob uncontrollably, ugly crying on my couch, sobbing. It's hard for me to even talk about it because I love it so much. It just read so naturally. It felt like everything that happened in this book just made sense. Like there were no weird, strange conflicts in there that were like, why are you doing this? Why are we miscommunicating? What's going on? Like everything made sense. Like the struggles that come with being a woman who's like 20 years older than your boyfriend and having a child who also her daughter is like a mega fan of this band. So like having that conflict as well. You have a daughter that's got these boys and posters on their bedroom wall, and like now that guy in the poster is someone you're dating, you know? So, I mean, I don't know. I've never been in that situation, but I loved it. I love this book with my whole heart, and I'm absolutely going to reread it next year. It was just phenomenal. Next, we have Carmilla. Sounds like blah, 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 blah. This is a pretty short classic. It's like the original vampire story in the West. It's what Dracula was based on. Seeing that there, I think I need to move the Garcia girls down to Zero Bedchem. Yeah, that feels right. Anyways, so Carmilla was fine. I was really into it when I read it. It's just like not something I would ever really return to. I do really appreciate what it did for me in that it alleviated some of my classics fears because it's a very short, little engaging classic. So I had a good time reading it. It was a little spooky and it was super queer, which I knew that it was queer vibes, but I didn't expect it to be this queer, which was cool to read. Okay, next we have The Intuitionist by Colson Whitehead. Zero Bedchem. Same thing. This was also for that other class that I read the Garcia girls for. I just really didn't vibe with this book at all. There were little nuggets of moments where Colson Whitehead's writing was just like, oh, that's really good. Now we have my second Shirley Jackson novel of the year, The Haunting of Hill House, which I think will go into One of Me is Cute But Two, though. I really enjoyed this too. I liked We Have Always Lived in the Castle better, but I still did have fun reading this book. I think my favorite part about it was just seeing like the original Haunted House of the West story and how that has had influences on other books that take place in haunted houses later, which I only read one other book that was like that, but I could see the inspiration that was drawn from Shirley Jackson's work. There's also a Netflix show called The Haunting of Hill House, which is like loosely inspired by this book. I wouldn't say it's like a true adaptation at all. It's super different. It's about this researcher who studies haunted houses, and he brings a group of people into Hill House, which is known for being haunted, and their plan is to stay for summer and just document all of the weird stuff that goes on in that house, and you just follow what weird stuff ensues. I really liked this story. Like I said, We've Always Lived in the Castle was better, but it was still a good time, and I love Shirley Jackson. Then we have Counting the Cost by Jill Duggar. Sounds like blah, 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 blah. This was good. This was a memoir. Jill Duggar is the oldest daughter, I believe, of the Duggar family, which if you're not familiar with them, they had a show called 19 Kids and Counting that was on TLC when I was a kid. It's about their family, which was like this big Christian family that lived pretty like off-grid kind of. They were kind of in a cult. I loved watching the show as a kid, and over the years, some scandals have come out about the family. So this memoir just kind of detailed what it was like being a kid on TV, what really happened with all those scandals, what Jill's experience was, and I found it very illuminating. I haven't watched the show in a really long time and like haven't thought about the family in a very long time. I just found this book randomly as I was scrolling through Libby. I love doing that. I love like looking through the library books on like the randomized section, and I find some of the most random things on there that I would never have known about. So I really enjoyed reading this. It was really interesting to go back and like relive some of those memories that I have of like watching them on TV and seeing it from her perspective. Then we have Persuasion by Jane Austen. One of Me is Cute But Two, though, because I do think I will read some more Jane Austen books. I did really like this. This was my first Jane Austen novel. I've tried to read Pride and Prejudice so many times in my life, and I think I talk about this all the time. This was the first one that I actually got through and enjoyed reading. This changed my perspective on her work because I've always seen her work as something that I would never be able to understand or never get into, and now I am. I really liked this. This was a second chance romance. I thought the romance was the best part of it. She also has some funny characters. Jane Austen's pretty funny, so I'll give her that. And I really enjoyed the setting when we went to this one beach. I really loved that. I really like when books take place on beaches or like by the water. Maybe it's because I grew up in Long Island. I'm trying to go a little faster because I've been recording for a long time. Now we have Golden Sun. Ugh, this book. This book was fantastic. This might have to go into I Know I've Been Known to Share. Yeah, I loved this book so much, which it's such a step up from Red Rising. I think Golden Sun, Pierce Brown really got it together. In the beginning of Golden Sun, I still wasn't convinced. I read like the first 60-ish pages and then put it down for like 6 months and fully expected to never return to the series. And then I saw this YouTube video by, I think the channel is called Two to Ramble, and they were just raving about Golden Sun and how phenomenal it was and how Red Rising, the first book, is the worst in the series and how it gets so good in Golden Sun. And I believed them, and I went back and I tried it, and they were totally right. And this book was just as fantastic as everybody says it is. This is where the description of calling the Red Rising series like Game of Thrones in outer space, this is when that starts. Like the world just expands so much. The politics become so much more complex. The characters become more complex. The relationships get deeper. The characters that felt flat became three-dimensional in the second book. And the plots that felt kind of random became unified in the second book. All the issues that I had with the first book, pretty much all of them got resolved with the second book. I think about the Red Rising series constantly. I read Morning Star and then took a little bit of a break. I'm like right in the halfway point of the series. I'm about to start Iron Gold, and I think it's going to be a January read. Reading this series has been like one of the highlights of my year. I remember reading this book was just a blur. Like I think I read it in like 3 days, and it's like a 600-page book. Maybe it's a little less, maybe like 500 pages, but I was just super obsessed with this. Next we have Morning Glory's Milking Farm. I think we'll just go in sounds like blah 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 blee. I love the cover of it. It's so funny. This was my first and only monster romance I have ever read. It's about a human girl and a minotaur. Their romance was actually pretty cute. It is a really short book. Like I think the audiobook's like 6 hours, but it was a very fun time. I remember I had just finished up Golden Sun and I was reading Morning Star, but I wanted something to listen to in the car in those off moments because like Morning Star, just the Red Rising series in general, sometimes you just really gotta like lock in and be paying attention, and I didn't have time to always be doing that. So I wanted something like kind of mindless and just like silly, goofy, fun time. And this definitely fulfilled that role. It didn't act like it was going to give anything more than that, though. Like, it didn't promise me a really emotionally complex book. It didn't really try to be that. There wasn't a lot of super difficult situations that came up. It wanted to be a cute little fun time, and it was that. So I appreciate it for that. Unlike that, next we have Funny Story by Emily Henry, which is also going to Zero Bedchem because I feel like it did promise me a little bit more. I feel like Emily Henry books, they kind of lead me to believe that there's going to be this emotional depth, and then I see those like pieces of the puzzle in there, but it just never really hits the mark for me. So I did like this better than Book Lovers. I will say that. I liked the love interest Miles in this book a lot. I thought he was the best part of it. It felt like all of the characters in this book were like way too self-aware. Like they felt like their own little mini therapists, and like they were self-diagnosing themselves in a way that just took me out of the story because real people don't really know their issues as acutely as the people in her books do. Like, how is everybody so self-aware? That is my issue with her books. So yeah, it wasn't my favorite, but I did still have a fun time reading this. Like, I remember the beginning, like 100 pages of this book, I was having an awesome time, and then as it went on, it just lost me. So I think I'm gonna give up on her books now because I think I'm just setting myself up for failure every time I pick one up. But I can say that I gave it a fair shot, and they weren't bad. Like, I get how other people have bedchem with these books. It's just definitely not for me. Then we have The Labyrinth. I was going to put this in 0 bedchem, but honestly, maybe just whatever devil's inside you, don't let him out tonight, because this was not very good. This was a graphic novel about this like dystopian post-apocalyptic world where people have moved underground because of something that happened above ground that like ruined the atmosphere. I can't remember what it is. I remember that I loved the art style of this novel, so that was really, really good. But the story was just like convoluted and weird and so forgettable. I have read graphic novels that can be hard hitting and impactful and really good. So just because this is a graphic novel, it doesn't let it escape criticism. But if you just want some good post-apocalyptic, creepy, grungy art, I would say pick this up. But if you want a good story, then skip this one. Then we have The Colossus of New York by Colson Whitehead. This will go into, sounds like blah, 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 blah. I thought this would be higher. I thought this would go one tier higher, but as time has passed, I don't think this book was awesome. It was definitely better than The Intuitionist, because this is his nonfiction work, and I think his nonfiction is way better than his fiction, but it is honestly a little bit forgettable. I remember at the time when I read it, I was in awe of the beauty of the sentences he was creating. Like, he was just really good craftsmanship of the English language. Does that even make sense? This is a collection of 13 nonfiction vignettes about New York City. Reading it was a really great experience, but as much as I can appreciate the craft in this book, it's not something that I really ever think about, and it's not something that I think I'll really ever return to, but it was still good. This was a good book, and if you want to read something about the city, then I would highly suggest to pick this up. Some of the vignettes that were in here were titled things like Port Authority, Waking Up Early, Central Park. It's just like an ode to New York City and like showing his love for his home. And I did appreciate it, and I do think it's really beautifully written. It's just like not something that's leaving a lasting impact on me. Then we have Morning Star, which is the 3rd book in the Red Rising series. This will go in One of Me is Cute But Two, though. It was really, really good. It's not as good as Golden Sun. I think Golden Sun is probably going to be my favorite book in the series, but it was still fantastic. Like, it could go into I Know I've Been Known to Share. It's like right there. It's at the cusp. I don't know. Maybe it should go up there. Screw it. Let's put it up there because this series is like a 6-star series in my head. Like, I just love it. Yeah, I can't really talk much about it because it's the 3rd book in the series, so can't really talk plot, but I don't think I gave you any plot about Red Rising. So if you're not familiar with the series, it's a sci-fi series about our main character, Darrow. Took another break to finish watching season 2 of Bridgerton with Afsana, which was really, really good. Anyways, I was telling you about Red Rising. So we're following our main character, Darrow, who is at the bottom of this hierarchical society of like genetically modified humans who have expanded and colonized all of space, or all of the solar system. So humans are on Jupiter, they're on Mars, they're everywhere. And in this society, people are ranked based on color. So there are reds at the bottom, and then there's like purples, pinks, blues, all up the way into golds who are at the top. And Darrow, after uncovering some secrets, has to infiltrate the gold ranks and try and free his people. So that's the gist of the series. Don't want to get much further into it than that, but it just gets better with time. As you get further into the books, the worlds get bigger, because like our first book, we don't really get to see the true extent of what the society looks like, and then further on in the books, you get to find out more about it. So I just loved Golden Sun and Morning Star. They're both fantastic. Now, moving on to The Wizard of Oz. I just finished this up. Like, all of these books now that we're talking about, I finished within the last, like, week or two. So, The Wizard of Oz sounds like blah, blah, blee, blee. It was okay. It was fine. It's a children's novel, so, you know, not super surprised by that. There are plenty of children's books that I really, really connect to, though. This was cute. It was really funny. It was cool to see the source material because I'm very interested in Wicked. I've read 20% of the book Wicked, and I still haven't seen the movie yet. I think it's a type of book that I would enjoy reading to a child more than just, like, reading on my own. I think, like, reading it with somebody else would be really fun, but just on my own as an adult, like, I listened to it in the car on my way to work and driving home, and it was fun. Nothing that's gonna like stick with me. You know, I think of other children's novels like the early Harry Potter books or the early Gregor the Overlander books, which are middle grade novels, and they still did like have a huge impact on me. So overall, my thoughts on The Wizard of Oz is it was cute, it was fine, not life-changing. Then we go on to Dungeons and Drama. This one is hard. It's really It's between One of Me is Cute, but Two, though. And I know I've been known to share. I think we'll just keep it in One of Me is Cute, but Two, though, because I did have one major issue with this book. Overall, I loved this book. This is a YA romance that takes place in a game store. Dungeons and Dragons is heavily included in this book. I have a reading vlog that I'm currently editing that's going to be up very soon, so I'll have like more concrete thoughts in that one. I ate this book up. I read it in a day. I got super obsessed with it. It has so many of my interests in it, and I felt like very seen in a personality way, in that like the main characters are all super nerdy. And in high school, this is what relationships looked like for me. This is what the guys that I had crushes on looked like. They were not like the star football hockey player guy that like suddenly sees like some nerdy kid who was in the band. It was not like that. I was talking to nerdy guys and I thought like nerdy things were cool, and I still am like that. So this is just like a very realistic look at young love for me, and I just loved it. I thought it was really sweet. I loved the nerdiness of it. The main girl's really into musical theater, so I love that as well because I love musical theater. My biggest issue with this is the way that they talked about race was just strange and out of place. A lot of these books do have issues with diversity, inclusivity, but this one, it was just like so in your face, out of nowhere, and distracting. Every time a new character got introduced, they were introduced via their race first, and if they were white people, then they got more characteristics given. Like, it was a white girl who walked in and she was beautiful and tall and had this color hair and whatever, and then the very few POCs that were in there were just introduced as being like a black person or being an Asian person, and like that was it. That was the only characteristic, and it's just like 99% of them were white, so like why even distinguish it at that point if you're going to like make it such a weird ratio? It was just weird. I didn't like it. So I don't know, I've just never seen that in a book. When you describe like your male protagonist coming onto the page, it's like, oh, it was a skinny white kid from my school. Like, what? That's so weird. Just left a bad taste in my mouth, but I read this from a library edition, so like I'm not like super upset because I didn't give this author any of my money. And when she releases her next book, Datings and Dragons, I will probably still read it, but also out of a library copy. So hopefully by then she'll have like seen all of the Goodreads reviews, because there are a ton of people on Goodreads who left the exact same reviews of like what I'm thinking. They said the same things. So it was definitely noticed by a lot of readers. So hopefully she takes that into consideration. She fixes it for her next book. Now, moving on to We Used to Live Here. This is One of Me is Cute, but Two, though. But this is a lie. I don't know if I can read any more of this author's books because this truly terrified me. This is the only horror novel? No, that's not true, because the Shirley Jackson novels are all horror novels, but because they're like older, I don't know, something about it they didn't scare me in the way that this book scared me. This book truly just terrified me. I also read this in a day. I read this like a day or two after I read Dungeons and Drama, so that was like a really heavy reading week for me. But this was so addictive. It's the best thriller, mystery, horror I have ever read. When I talk about how sometimes like those mysteries, the reveal comes at the end and I feel cheated, it feels lazy and not well thought out, this is the opposite. This felt so thoughtful, so intricate, so mind-boggling, also like another acid trip type of book. So this is I don't even know how to explain this to you, because I do think this is a good book to go into blind, because I went into it blind and I think it was a great experience. This is following a girl who is living in this old house. She's like fixing it up with her partner. And one day she's home alone at night, and this random family shows up to her house and they're like, hey, the father used to live in this house. This was his childhood home, and he wants to show his kids and his wife like around the house. They're in the area. They're just passing through. They wonder if they could just come inside, take a look around, because he used to live here. And basically everything inside her is saying, no, do not let them in. I should not let them come into this house. Once they come in, they're never going to leave. But of course, she lets them in, and then we follow the story from there. What happens once the family enters the house? What sort of things go on? God, it was creepy. It was scary. It gave me so much anxiety. And then by the end of it, it went in a totally different direction than I ever thought it could have been, but in the best way possible. I went down so many Reddit rabbit holes for this book. I watched hours of video analyses about it. It took over my life for like day that I read it and like the following 3 to 4 days where I was just like researching about it. This book also has like mixed media in it, so if you're into that, this is really fun in that regard. It's got like some chapters are just told about our main character, and then some chapters are like little documents or video transcripts, and it's just super engaging. Like, I didn't want to stop listening to this. If you like scary things, horror things, creepy things, things that are going to keep you up at night, you will love this book. It's just so good. But it was really scary to me, and it did like creep me out for several days later. I know the author is coming out with a new book, I think in 2025, so I don't know if I'm even going to be able to read that or not. I probably will, but I don't know. I'm gonna have to read like some fluffy, happy romances like right before and right after, like sandwich it, because it did like affect me a lot. I don't do well with horror, but this was a fantastic book. So the last 3 books I haven't finished. I'm in the middle of all of these, but I'm like at the tail end. I have like less than 50 pages of all 3 of these, so I would say I'm just finished enough with it that I can rank them. So the goal is the 4th book in the off-campus series, and this was my least favorite. I thought it would be my favorite. I was really enjoying it in the beginning. I think this might be my fault because I did take a really substantial break in the middle of this book just because I wasn't in the mood for it. So I read it for a little bit, got to like 30%, put it down for like 6 months, came back to it, and have been reading it so slowly for like the past month and a half. So I think with not reading it in a timely manner, I kind of ruined the experience for this book. So I feel like I've been dragging through the plot for so long. So I'm gonna put this in 0 bedchem. Maybe sounds like, let me be real, 0 bedchem. I'm not enjoying it. I really was enjoying it in the beginning though. This one's about John Tucker, who is the last roommate left to explore in the off-campus series. It's a surprise pregnancy trope, if you like that. I don't think it was the pregnancy that like turned me off from this book. I don't think I mind it. I think it's me. I think it's how slow I've been reading it. And I also think Tucker has like the least personality out of the group. The other 3 boys, I feel like I have very distinct understandings of like what their likes are and their dislikes and what their senses of humor are. But for Tucker, I'm just kind of like, I hardly know you. You just feel like a blank box, which, like I said, could be a product of me reading it in this like really slow motion manner. So maybe if I do a reread in the future, this will move up. It's not a bad book. Like I said, I do love all of the books in this off-campus series. So this is like a not 0 bedchem. Maybe we have like 10 bedchem out of 100. Anyways, okay, moving on to Brave New World. I have already read this. This is a reread. I'm reading this with my cousin Hannah. We've been reading it for a few months. I'm going to put this in 0 bedchem. I didn't really enjoy this book the first time I read it, and I'm not really enjoying it that much right now. I think it's fun to discuss thematically. I think I've already talked about this in a video, but this is fun to talk about, like, to analyze the societal impact of it, how it reflects our world, and the thoughts that Huxley is trying to communicate to us and how relevant it still is today. I think like intellectually, academically, it's very interesting. It's got a lot of stuff to chew on, but in terms of like entertainment value, did I like reading it? Did I like my experience? No. It's not really fun for me. Like I would never pick this book up again if not for the obligations of like the first time I read it for school, and now the second time I'm reading it because I made a commitment to read it with Hannah. So other than that, I don't think I'll ever touch this book again. This is a dystopian book about a very brainwashed society. It's a very famous novel, so if you're interested, definitely look it up, but I don't really want to get into it. Okay, last but not least, we have Orbital by Samantha Harvey. One of me is cute, but 2 though. This book is really great. Samantha Harvey's writing is just fantastic. It won the Booker Prize. It won the Booker Prize this year, and I can totally see why. It's a really short novel. I actually have it here. I had a few of the books here, and I meant to show them as I said them, but I just forgot. It's super tiny. I love when books are this like small size, really short. It's like 200 pages, and they're not even like full-size pages. This is a book about 6 astronauts who are in space orbiting the Earth 16 times a day. They're just going in circles around the Earth, and it's really a introspective, reflective book thinking about what it's like being an individual who's so tiny in comparison to the huge vastness of the universe. Talks about family, politics, individualism. It kind of reminds me of how Colson Whitehead's The Colossus of New York was just like an ode to New York City and a love for where he comes from. This book is kind of an ode to the earth as well. It's a love for our planet, and just like a deep reverence for the earth and this place that we all are a part of. It really just has such gorgeous writing. And this is the year I've gotten really into sci-fi through the Red Rising series. So this isn't like, I wouldn't call it a sci-fi, even though it could be considered a sci-fi. It's more of like a literary fiction in a sci-fi setting. So, but yeah, I just love this. I love books in space, and this is just a beautifully written one. Cool. Well, look at that. This ranking is different than how I thought it would be. I don't even know if I could like stand by this ranking with my whole chest. Like I might move things. When I originally envisioned this, I thought I would just have the Anthropocene Reviewed and the Idea View in my very top tier, and then all the other books that are there, because like some of them are rereads, I just wasn't going to include those. And then the Red Rising books that are up there, I was going to put those one tier lower. I don't know where they should go, but I'm trying not to overthink it, because at the end of the day, this doesn't matter. I hope I've communicated well enough that these are fantastic books. So regardless of what tier they're in, I hope my description maybe gave you a good recommendation, even for the books that I wasn't super into, like things that I've gotten 0 bedchem. Like, I still think that they are good books. They just weren't for me. The only things that I think are genuinely bad books were Whatever Devil's Inside You, Don't Let Him Out Tonight. Like, those, not great. I shouldn't even put The Labyrinth in there, honestly, because it's like, it's not that bad. 0 bedchem. The only book that deserves to be down there is Never Lie. Because The Labyrinth, I can respect it at least. The art saved it. And you know, the art is half of the battle for a graphic novel, so I will give it that. Yeah, this feels better. This definitely feels better. I've been recording for forever, so I'm sick of hearing my own voice now. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you got some good recommendations. Fingers crossed. Please let me know if you're going to read any of these books, if you have read any of these books, what were your favorite books of the year, your least favorite books, your rankings. Do you disagree with any of the rankings that I have? Literally anything. I just love to know. Thank you for watching the video this long. If you liked it, make sure to like and subscribe. I will see you guys in 2025. Goodbye.